It's 2025, and the UK is facing a crisis. It's not a flashy crisis like a meteor hurtling towards Earth. Instead, it's a slow burn. This crisis is austerity, and it's quietly crushing millions. For over a decade, the UK government has been tightening its belt. This isn't about cutting back on unnecessary spending, it's about slashing vital public services. The consequences, they're stark, and they're hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. We're talking about families struggling to put food on the table. We're talking about pensioners unable to heat their homes. We're talking about a system that's pushing people into poverty, not pulling them out. This isn't just bad economics, it's morally bankrupt. The UK government might claim that austerity is a necessary evil, but the numbers tell a different story. A story of widening inequality, stagnant wages, and a shrinking safety net. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about real people, real lives being destroyed. It's time to stop pretending austerity is working, it's time to demand better. Let's talk about wealth in the UK. You might imagine a nation where prosperity is shared, even if somewhat unevenly. You'd be wrong, the reality is far more grim. The gap between the rich and the poor is staggering. Imagine a pie chart representing all the wealth in the UK. The bottom 50% of the population, those who are struggling the most, would only get a sliver, a measly 5% to be precise, but it gets worse. The bottom fifth of the population, the poorest among us, own a pathetic 0.5% of the nation's wealth. Think about that for a second. A tiny elite hoarding the vast majority of the wealth while millions struggle to make ends meet. This isn't just unfair, it's a recipe for social unrest. When such a small percentage of the population controls so much wealth, it creates a system rigged against the majority. Austerity only exacerbates this problem, further concentrating wealth in the hands of the few. Remember 2008, the financial crisis? Yeah, good times. Except for the part where real average wages in the UK basically froze in time. Fast forward to 2025, and guess what? They're still stuck. People are working their butts off, but their paychecks aren't keeping up with the rising cost of living. It's like running on a treadmill, working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. Now you might think, well, at least people have jobs, and you'd be right, some do. But here's the kicker. A whopping 37% of universal credit claimants, the folks relying on government assistance, are employed. Let that sink in. People are working full-time jobs and still can't afford the basics. That's not a thriving economy, that's a broken system. Austerity isn't just abstract economic policy, it has a human cost, and it's a cost we can measure. The UK government's own projections estimate that recent benefit cuts will push over 400,000 people into poverty. That's right, 400,000 people. These aren't just statistics, these are families, children, elderly people who will be forced to choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table. This is the reality of austerity in 2025. The evidence is clear. Austerity has failed. It has failed to reduce the deficit, and it has failed the British people. It's time for a new approach, one that prioritizes the well-being of all citizens, not just the wealthy few. We can't afford to wait any longer. The time for action is now.